Welcome to Appointed.
Well, I'm so excited to be joined today by Dan Huang-Taylor. Thank you and welcome to Appointed, Mr. Taylor, or can I call you Dan?
You can call me Dan by all means.
Excellent, and you just call me Kim. So, Dan is the executive director of Food Banks BC, a provincial association that's working to end hunger in British Columbia and supports 103 food banks across the province. I'm aware that you've been the executive director since 2020, that you have gone through some incredibly challenging periods, not least of all the COVID period, extreme weather events, all other sorts of things. And I know that I became familiar with some of your work through the end put food banks out of business campaign, which I thought was fascinating because many of us believe that. Not that we don't like food banks, of course, when they're necessary at this stage, but the fact that food banks are rooted in a charity model that is was designed to be a stopgap. It was never anticipated we'd need food banks going into millennia, but here we are, and so many of us want to see the whole issue of food and income insecurity, not to mention housing insecurity as well, dealt with. And so it sounds like you too have come from a bit of that background, and I know you were in a senior leadership position as well with the YMCA of Greater Vancouver, who do fabulous work. I know we partnered with them many times when I was with Elizabeth Fry, and so there is a lot of work to be done. So we're going to discuss today food insecurity and the intersection of food insecurity and poverty, and why so many of us are pushing for a guaranteed livable income as part of that initiative. So thank you for joining us today on Appointed, Dan. And I want you to start by talking about how you ended up in this work. How did you come to this place? I can tell from your accent that you didn't start in this place. So how did you come here, and what are some of the things you've been working on, and why do you see these issues as important?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's a rare opportunity to talk about this work, and any opportunity we can take to highlight the importance of the work that's happening to alleviate hunger and to end hunger is one that I cherish, and I'm deeply grateful. But yes, as you mentioned, that my accent it gives me away. I'm not originally from Canada. I moved to Canada in 2004. I've always lived in BC. Consider myself very lucky to live in such a beautiful part of the world. And it's these are challenging times. I mean, as beautiful as our environment is, we are in a time when people are struggling more than ever. And I've worked now in nonprofit since 2009. I was originally my career taken me in many different directions, and in 2008, like many people, I lost my job due to the challenging economic circumstances of the time. And then my next position was with an organization that was helping people with disabilities find employment. And this is really where I kind of continued working in employment training, that type of work for folks with barriers to employment until I started with Food Banks BC. So this experience of being exposed to working in nonprofit as my first. I never looked back after being in that role. It was more rewarding than anything I'd ever taken from any previous experience I'd had. And then starting with Food Banks BC, that happened in July of 2020. And of course, as it would be for, I think it was for many, it was a very difficult, challenging, uncertain, anxiety-ridden time. And it was my first role working as an executive director as well. So I was, you know, joining this organization at a time, learning the ropes of this new role in the new sector that I was working in, while also navigating through the deeply challenging circumstances that our society was at the time. And what we've seen in BC is going from 2020 and the start of COVID and the continued challenges that ensued in the following years, compounded by things such as the climate emergencies we saw in 2021, the destructive fires that completely wiped the village of Lytton off the map in the summer of 2021, followed by the floods later that year that crippled the infrastructure of the province with the loss of major road arteries. And then we just go forward a few months to 2022. Russia invades Ukraine. We see economic turmoil just ripple around the world. And really, what was the start of the cost of living crisis that we're still in the midst of, with no end in sight, and the crippling level of food insecurity that has resulted as a result of what we've seen happening around the world and domestically as well.
And is the threat of tariffs? I mean, we're hearing everywhere the threat of tariffs and the absolute, who knows what to call it, that's happening south of our border is impacting, at the very least, people's feelings of insecurity. Have you seen a rise in food bank use, or is that something you're anticipating as well?
More so anticipating, but certainly the threat of these tariffs and the ramifications that we could see as a result of them are frankly quite terrifying. We know that millions of Canadians are already struggling to make ends meet, and this is, with a reliance on a charitable food system that is under just this unsustainable level of strain. So I read a report that tariffs are anticipated to maybe increase the average Canadian household costs by about $1,900 a year. Now, with about 50% of Canadians living paycheck to paycheck, this rise in cost is going to put considerable strain on folks who are already struggling. And I mean, we can't see how those things can, how can we ensure that people do not get sucked into poverty even deeper than they already are? So it's a very concerning time.
Well, and that amount, $1,900, that's well and exceeds what anybody gets on social assistance in virtually every part of this country. So the fact that we could see those kinds of additional costs to food, and I know, many people talked about going to food banks for the first time during the pandemic. And then, as you mentioned, with the climate issues and emergencies, floods and fires and hurricanes, it's just up the ante for everybody. And I'm, the when you look at these issues, do you see any particular additional issues for? I mean, there are a lot of Indigenous communities in BC, and we certainly have heard from many, certainly northern communities, about the particular food insecurity and scarcity that exists because of other types of climate issues, which is just in terms of short growing seasons and that sort of thing. How do you adjust for regional and other kinds of differences between groups?
Well, we definitely see certain groups disproportionately impacted by food insecurity, by climate change. I mean, if we look to areas of BC that have been devastated by fires, the loss of local food access, traditional food access, has been devastating. Berry crops down 90%. The ability to hunt hunting from the land has been severely impacted because there's no ground for animals to feed from. It's a really, really concerning situation. And then we just look generally at our, the level of disproportionate poverty that exists. And there is certain, marginalized groups and people who are disproportionately impacted by that. And the systemic factors that have created this disproportionate level of poverty, that are societal systemic discrimination, be it colonialism or racism, sexism, ageism, homophobia, all of these continue to create significant barriers for economic advancement for so many in society. But then we have obviously the role that government play in entrenching certain groups in poverty, when the social assistance or disability benefits are simply inadequate to keep pace with the cost of living. So these are these are being feelings that are acutely felt among many. One of the trends we've seen in food bank usage is a shift in the profile of people that are using the food banks, or at least a growing and emerging number of people who are working full time yet still needing to access food banks. And these are folks who are who have some form of income and are needing that supplementary support. Others are so deeply entrenched in poverty and don't have that supplementary income and are still having to grapple with these increasing costs. So
Hmm.
the depth of severe poverty is extremely concerning.
Right. And we saw for the first time that I knew about it, but it's no doubt not when it first started happening. During the pandemic, I actually met people at our shelters here in Ottawa where they were working full time, minimum wage jobs, and couldn't afford to pay rent either. So there's food insecurity, and then there's housing insecurity that we're trying to grapple with as well. So you are one of the key people involved in put food banks out of business. How did you become involved in that? And can you tell me a bit more about the organization?
Um, well, that's a very generous way of putting it. I've only recently become attached to the initiative, and certainly in learning about the work that Matt's doing and seeing this, this movement towards ending the need for food banks, I was immediately sold on this concept. So I first came across it online. I reached out to Matt Noble, of course, who you know, and this is directly aligned with something that I've been saying for a couple of years, just like we have to be in the business of putting ourselves out of business. But for Food Banks BC, we weren't walking the talk. We had really sort of had to kind of mobilize these efforts. And I saw this as an opportunity for us to get more actively involved. And we do need to be taking action at a local level for sure, but as a collective, this is such a we're a growing sector. We shouldn't be. We're going in the wrong direction. There are more and more hunger relief agencies popping up all the time as a reflection on the sheer level of demand that exists out there. There are so many charities that are being pulled away from their, the core function, that their raison d'etre and their primary cause, and having to devote resources to feeding their clients, to get their clients to be able to come in, to access the critical services they're offering, because the clients aren't able to eat. So
Hmm.
these are trends that are so concerning, and it was just imperative that we do something. So we were very, very happy to jump on board and put our support behind this very important initiative.
Hmm. Well, and the first way I became aware is they reached out because they had linked this food insecurity with the push that a number of us had in here, senators and members of parliament, to develop a national guaranteed livable income framework. And so it's great to hear you say that. I think it's visionary when leaders in positions like yours are taking those positions, because oftentimes they become self-fulfilling in the sense that people just keep doing the same thing instead of really trying to address those root causes. And I've often said that if those of us in this kind of work, I'm now a public servant, but if those of us because that's the kind of work I was doing as well, aren't working to put ourselves out of work, then we should be questioning why we exist, because really there's lots of other things we could all be doing that would be equally beneficial, and not keep other people so reliant on services. So where would you like to see this work go next? How do you, in your day-to-day, how are you combining the calls for basic income or income security and food insecurity in terms of whether it's how you're operating as the Food Banks BC, or any other initiatives with which you're involved?
It's a balance that we have to strike. So just to build on your previous point, Kim, the Food Banks BC changed our mission. We changed our mission at the beginning of 2024, um, to really focus on the end users of food banks to ensure that British Columbians facing food insecurity were at the forefront of all of our strategic decision making and the work that we were doing. So we shifted over to alleviate poverty today and to and prevent hunger tomorrow. Sorry, alleviate hunger today and to prevent hunger tomorrow for all British Columbians. And as well as kind of putting that focus on the end users, we also that allowed us to start thinking about our role as an advocate to see the root causes of poverty addressed. And I would say at this current time that the majority of our work and our focus and our energy is still focused on a lot of that alleviation. We are a member association. Our membership has grown actually. In the intro, it's 103. We're 111 as of
Wow.
today. And we're working with an increasing number of other agencies outside of our network that are also in the hunger relief space, particularly those that might be providing specialized services to equity deserving groups, and have other types of programming that is sort of meeting other needs within our communities. And because of just this growing demand for services, it is imperative on us that we're providing the support that we can to our members and to the hunger relief sector in BC. But what we've been able to do is make some real advancements in some of the other work, in the advocacy and the prevention piece. Last year, we released our inaugural BC Hunger Report. This was a very in-depth study of food bank usage in BC, tied to policy recommendations to help alleviate the strain on food banks, but also getting to some of those root causes, those systemic issues that are creating the demand for food banks. And I'll say, you know, I have to acknowledge the work that's come before us, such as the folks from Feed Ontario and Food Banks Canada, who use their research capacity and their their understanding of these issues to create some really important tools and resources that we've been able to build on or to replicate in some cases, as we look to sort of collectively and nationally build a better understanding about what needs to happen to and end the need for food banks altogether. So we're balancing it, but it can be tough because, you know, a lot of the things that we're pushing for, these interventions, this focusing on addressing the poverty, these aren't things that we're seeing a lot of interest in from a lot of our elected officials. I mean, there will be positive sounding conversations and statements and commitments that might be made, but the level of intervention that's required and the investment to really make a meaningful difference just hasn't materialized. So I mean, I want to acknowledge the work that you're doing and to establish the a guaranteed livable income for people in Canada. We've seen the impact that such interventions can have on alleviating poverty, and we have to be making some very bold commitments and investments to ensure that these root causes of poverty are being addressed and cut off at the stem.
Hmm. And I think the collaboration of you, your organization, so many groups. You mentioned Feed Ontario. We'll put in the notes for this pointed. So those of you who are listening or watching, if you're watching this on YouTube, do look in the notes for this episode, because we'll put in the link to Feed Ontario. We'll put in the link to your research as well and your website. And we also are working, of course, with folks like Dr. Zhao, who's at UBC doing the cash transfer work. And so these kinds of coalitions and partnerships are really, in my humble opinion, key to us moving forward. And, part of the reason that elected officials aren't interested in this, I think, is because you often will. It takes a little bit of time. It's not the kind of cash inflection that immediately you see results, although you see them fairly quickly, as Dr. Zhao has shown with her cash transfers initiative. but many elected officials, these aren't the folks they're getting elected by, and so there's not the same political impetus, sadly. And so I think we do need to continue to work. But it's not surprising municipalities, so many are on board because they see directly the impact of these issues in their communities. So I want to thank you very much and really congratulate you. Keep up the great work, and if there's anything we can be doing to further assist, please don't hesitate.
And thank you for continuing to support the work that we're trying to do at a level that we're unable to. As much attention that we can cast on this as we can will help make progress. So we really do appreciate the support. We are trying to look at different ways to transform food systems to reduce waste. There are policies that don't just tie to poverty that can play a really important role in creating greater access to food, and we lose too much food that so many people are still needing to access food banks, yet we're losing billions of dollars of food every single month. So I think working with the corporate sector and government and nonprofit, greater collaboration will lead us to a point where we are seeing more access to food, as well as the environmental impacts and the way it supports our agri-food sector as well. So that was the only other thing that I would.
That's a great point, and it ties into, I think many of us right now with the threats coming for tariffs are saying things like "Buy Canadian." We're also many of us look to the types of folks who are producing food, whether it's local, so that you can support the local economy, but also organizations that donate their foods or provide food at cut rates and but often donating them. I mean, I just picked up some bread the other day from Cobb's, and I purposely go to that spot because I know they donate at the end of the day to many other great causes. So that's great to talk about corporate responsibility as well.
Yeah.
And yeah. And not to mention the monopoly that some of the big grocery chains have, that they could actually address some of this issue as well, not just in the food supply, but also in better wages and benefits for their employees.
And we know that the government inquiries have optically held to task some of those grocery monopolies. I would struggle to sort of see any what the outcomes of those inquiries resulted in, but certainly we need to see more responsibility being taken by certainly our retail food sector in ensuring that we are not profiteering off an already very like we said, people who are in their employ are also accessing food banks. So
Yes.
that doesn't reconcile either. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being part of that work, and thank you again for joining us on Appointed.